My name is Paul Reiber. I'm a member of the Krenov Foundation board, and we are going to interview students in the program on this last week of the school year.
I'm Hunter Menken. I'm a second-year student. I've been woodworking since I was young, but most of the woodworking that I did was very simple projects with my grandfather and father. Mostly we wanted something in the backyard and we would build it. Mom wanted a gazebo, we built a gazebo. We needed a new fence, we put in a fence. So we had a very can-do attitude growing up. I didn't really think of woodworking as a fine thing until I got a little bit older and I heard whisperings of this Krenov School, and I wanted to investigate a little bit, but at the time I was in college and studying theater, and so I just didn't have time. And then the pandemic happened years later, and I was in New York, and I moved back to Iowa for a bit, and I was cleaning out my grandfather's shop, and I thought, what a shame all these tools are just not getting used. And I decided to start woodworking, and I read almost every library book on woodworking available in my tiny little public library in my hometown, and the only one I didn't read was Cabinet Maker's Notebook, because I assumed Cabinet Maker's Notebook was a book about kitchen cabinet installs, and that didn't interest me. Mm-hmm. I was into fine woodworking. Who would have thought? But I ended up reading Krenov's name again, and I was like, oh, that's the person who wrote this Cabinet Maker's Notebook. Let's give that a shot. And I read it, and it changed everything for me. Uh-huh. Absolutely everything. And then I became fervently interested in this type of woodworking. And so I spent a year in LA before coming out here to give acting one last go. And instead I ended up spending about 8 hours a day every day making wood projects in my bedroom in my tiny apartment. And I knew at that point that it was the acting thing had passed and that the woodworking had taken over. And so I applied to the Krenov School and I got in, and that's been my life for 2 years.
Any particular moments or just as part of your experience here or related to a particular project that really stand out?
Yes. I mean, all of the projects are very special to me that I made here. The project that I'm the most proud of was my first semester piece of this second year. It was a post and panel cabinet out of elm and Iroko and nutmeg. And that plank of elm that I used was a board that I saw last year as a first year. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I want to use this wood so badly. And so it kept on going around the room, and I was like, please don't use it, please don't use it. And then no one used it. So I spent the whole summer with pictures of this board trying to figure out what I was going to make with it. And I felt like I had so much extra time with that piece of wood. I felt like I actually got to do the composing thing that Krenov writes about so much, composing. And I was really happy that I got to do that with at least one of my projects. Everything else, you're kind of trying to, since there's so little time, you're trying to find a board that matches your vision. And it was great to have a board and match what I felt was its vision for itself. So that project especially stands out.
What advice would you give to new students?
A lot of advice. I think one of the biggest helps for me coming into my first year was I had read all of Krenov's books, so I knew exactly what to expect, really, from the exercises and from the kind of work that would be done in the classroom. And because I was such a fervent reader of his work, I felt like I had a pretty good idea of what I wanted to make and the techniques I wanted to hone while in the school. So coming in, I had a pretty good idea, and so I was able to just keep that momentum throughout the year. I think the biggest piece of advice is hold on. It's over so fast. First semester, with the first 5 weeks of exercises, it can feel like, oh, this is going to be a full year. But you kind of finish the exercises, you blink a couple of times, and then it's over. Because it's a sprint from end of exercises through first project, first show, second project, second show. It just goes so quickly. And so enjoy every moment of it, especially if you're just doing the 1 year.
How is the kind of rural small town environment affected you or impacted you?
I grew up in a town of 7,000, which is comparable to Fort Bragg. Fort Bragg is a little more touristy than my hometown was. In the center of Iowa, it's kind of a flyover state. So at times it feels like home. At other times it feels a little more bustling. You adjust. I think it's strange. The Krenov School feels kind of removed from Fort Bragg. There are people in Fort Bragg that doesn't know that this school that is world renowned exists. And so I feel like we're kind of in our own little bubble within this small bubble as it is. So I think adjusting is fine. The prices is the hardest thing to adjust to. We're in a small town and it feels like we're paying larger city prices at times. And that can be tough on the wallet.
How is the Krenov scholarships impacted you?
It's been incredible. I received a scholarship my first year, and I received a scholarship this year. And without it, I can't imagine the amount of stress and anxiety I would be under. I think I could have made it work financially, but I would have used woods that I didn't want to use as much. I felt like with the scholarships, I was able to just make whatever I wanted. Because one of the biggest prices is your project prices. And so, like my first year, I was able to use both pear and dossier on a project. And those are like the dream woods. And I'll never have an opportunity to work those woods again. So with the help of the foundation, I was able to afford something like that. And it makes all the difference. I'm so happy that I got to do that.
Good. And how has this experience impacted your sense of your future?
It's hard to say at this point. With the show that was just put up, there's a fog still from sleep deprivation and chewing the fingernails. But I feel as though, regardless of where my path goes, the skills I learned here, the attention to detail, the work ethic of this place will carry through into whatever I do. I am going to pursue woodworking as hard as it may be. But I feel more clear about my future now at 28 than I did in any of my previous years. And I feel very grateful to the instructors here and to all of the friends of the program to have boosted me the way I feel boosted. I'm just excited to see what happens, I guess, next. You'll never know. I mean, it helps with the commission that's coming up. Knowing that not one person but two people out there wanted a piece of furniture that I designed and made is a pretty big confidence boost, which is nice coming to the end of my time here, knowing that someone out there at least is listening and watching.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
This has been fun.